Fox News alert. Tens of thousands of people waking up this morning without their cell phone service because of a major outage, and we are monitoring.
On this episode, we're looking into the problem of no one responding when you need help, either because the 911 network is down or because there's no cops available. However, before we do that and get into it with our good friends Keith and Jeff, since Mike's not here today, I will do the conflicted question of the day for him. You're at a convenience store and a gunfight breaks out a few aisles over. At first glance, it looks like the place is being robbed. You are carrying a concealed weapon, which is loaded and ready to go. What would your next steps be? So we'll circle back at the end of this episode and the three of us will answer it. So let's jump right in on the lack of law enforcement and severe understaffing. So I've got a couple stories open. I'll bring them up quickly. I'm not going to get deep into each one of these. The links will be down below. I will mention that the last time we did this, one of the news articles that we covered was on Breitbart. When I went to upload that to YouTube, it wouldn't let me save the video. I took the Breitbart link out, let me save it. I put the Breitbart link back in, wouldn't let me save it. So just another example of big tech doing censorship.
Yep.
Chose this article because of Jeff being in Phoenix area, understaffed and underpaid. And we've discussed this previously. We had a comment on one of our previous videos from somebody who was a K-9 officer in the Savannah area, and his starting pay was $13 an hour, and he's a relatively new recruit. But because he's the K-9 guy, he gets $3 an hour more, so he gets $16 an hour. That's, you pay him peanuts to send you monkeys. It's a simple formula. You can't pay people that type of money to put their life on the line for others. Obviously, lots of defund the police bullshit over recent years in Seattle, and now they're paying the price for that. So they don't even have enough law enforcement to investigate sexual assault crimes. It's a good deal. Like, that's just fantastic for society. This article here, again, the links will be down below. Lowest staffing levels since 1991. They're trying to turn that around, but they shit on the cops through the whole 2020 baloney, and you reap what you sow. This one's from South Carolina. They don't have enough officers on staff to investigate drug crimes in this particular area. Here's another one with regards to Washington, D.C., and they are so understaffed, they're now trying to recruit people from Puerto Rico. Here's another one that discusses how unequipped, underfunded, and understaffed law enforcement agencies are, and nothing good comes out of this. And Keith will explain what the levels are. If you search for what the understaffing levels are, you will find nothing but a bunch of woke BS blaming the cops for being underfunded when it was the defund police stuff by these woke liberal politicians. So Keith, as he travels the country training law enforcement, he's been asking them what their staffing levels look like, and he'll speak to that himself in a second. Here's another one for Los Angeles. So not only are they severely understaffed and doing a brutal job, it's got to the point where suicides are rising dramatically. If you search on this, you'll find that this is not unique to Los Angeles. This is happening in multiple jurisdictions. And at the end of the day, this pretty much says it all right here. Understaffed police agencies means danger for citizens. Nothing good comes out of that. So Keith, let's just go ahead and jump right in. You were in this for 30 years. You only retired a few years ago. You now train law enforcement across the country. You've got as much or more knowledge on this subject than anybody else. So take it away.
So right now, you're right. I do ask guys that are in my class right now. I'll ask them, hey, what's your staffing levels? It's anywhere from 50 to 75%. And when you're down at that 50 to 75% level, you're choosing at that point to not do certain things. We're not going to respond to certain calls. We're not going to investigate certain crimes. We're not going to, let's say, have patrol officers on a certain side of town because it's low crime and we're going to put them over in the high crime area. So it's pretty significant. And the cops that are working, a 12-hour shift is the norm. I know my shift was 11 hours, and then you have overtime on top of that. So a lot of these guys are working 12-hour shifts already, because also when you're down to 50%, you're usually eliminating patrol shifts, which means you're going to a 12-hour shift and you're just hot swapping patrol cars and equipment and just continually rolling through. So these guys, if somebody calls in sick, you're working a double shift, and the double shift is the norm, right? So that puts stresses on their families, which leads to, we saw in the ultimate way would be suicide. I've had more friends commit suicide since 2014 than all of before that. All before that time. We're in crisis. And what that means to you as a citizen, I know you're like, oh, well, that sucks for the cops. No, man, it sucks for you too, because you're going to call 911 and either nobody's going to show up or it's going to take a very long time for somebody to get there. And you're going to have to be your own cop.
It's crazy. Jeff, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, we've seen it out here with the illegals. Everything is they're just inundated. And Tucson is another one of those sanctuary cities where they're pulling money from the police and everybody else to boost up the spending for the illegals. Well, that's not going to help anybody because you're just bringing in more potential criminals and you're paying for it by cutting the cops. And another aspect of this, I think you hit on earlier, is they may not answer when you call. If the system goes down, you look at the AT&T mess last week. If someone targets that system, all comms, and Keith can tell you go down to a 911 center, everything's on computers. They're not picking up an old landline and then getting on a radio and calling the officer and saying, go respond to this address. It's all on computer. And when the computer goes down, what the hell happens? Everybody's blind and deaf. And even if they wanted to respond, even if you had the people there to do the response, if you have the officers, if you can't talk to them, you can't tell them where to go. They don't know. They could be 2 blocks away and they have no clue.
Bring up a good point about the AT&T outage. Most people don't know this, but there's a system called FirstNet, and FirstNet is for first responders. So I'm a current police officer. I don't go to AT&T, I go to FirstNet. So if the system goes down or the system is crowded, my phone gets priority. So that way I can call my troops, like if the radios go down, and it was a great idea. They were saying that FirstNet did not get affected. 100% it went down. There were numerous cops saying that they couldn't get calls on because we don't get like you get calls on the radio, but most of your stuff comes on the computer now. Because the radio's so busy. Their computers wouldn't work because they couldn't connect to cellular. Cops' phones wouldn't work, so they couldn't talk to each other on the phone. It was whoever put that out that said FirstNet wasn't affected is a complete lie.
JJ Morris, part of our team at Survival Dispatch, was a SAR-1 SAR tech. So since 1996, there's only been 101 people certified at that level. He's extremely high level SAR tech, and he's referred to FirstNet multiple times, like when they went in for Katrina and those sort of disasters. And absolutely a great network, great service if it stays up.
It showed that when the cellular service goes down, FirstNet's going to go down too.
Because it's a priority thing. It's not separate infrastructure.
Yeah. Yep.
It's prioritizing data essentially across the wire versus non-law enforcement, non-first responder sort of thing. Now that we're on that topic, we can unequivocally say that we have firsthand sources who've confirmed that last week's cellular outage, which was not just AT&T, it was also Verizon and T-Mobile in certain jurisdictions, was 100% a Chinese cyber attack. No ifs, ands, or buts. Keith stated well last week, essentially a shot across the bow from the Chinese to say, when we go to take Taiwan, because they've made no secrets that by 2026 they're taking Taiwan back, that they will have the ability to shut off all of our communications. So what happens when your communications go down? It's not just 911. There's no supply chain, right? So your ERP systems and your grocery stores that say, oh, we've dropped to this level, cut a bill of lading and a PO to get this food on the way. That's all done. So there's no more food, nothing coming whatsoever. This episode of SDN is brought to you by Switch It Up, your national grid down service provider. Get a quote on a solar PV system with battery backup at switchitupinc.com or click the link in the video description below. And I'll just quickly address this just because networking is a pretty big component of my career. If this was a CME, it would have affected the entire globe. If this was a solar flare, it would have affected all cell phones and power grids that go with it. So the solar flares that hit us that day in the morning hit Europe. They didn't hit North America. And software-wise, if AT&T truly had a software problem, how does that explain completely separate infrastructure from Verizon and T-Mobile also going down and significantly going down? We're not talking about small isolated stuff. So no ifs, ands, or buts. Chinese cyber attack. If you don't believe us, that's okay. You have the right to believe whatever you want, but you better be prepared for the day that comes when all these networks get shut down by our foreign adversaries. Let's come back to the police, Keith. When you go city to city, what do you hear anecdotally from people who say, yeah, we're 50% understaffed and this is what it's doing to me as an individual officer?
Well, to them as an individual, they're debating whether they should. Everybody has one foot out the door. Okay. They all see the writing on the wall. The job is dying. And a lot of them are there because they love police work and they love the mission, but they realize there's no support for them anymore. And if there's no support for them anymore and I'm working my ass off, why am I here? Literally, everybody's got a foot out the door. They've got some side gig going on and they're just hoping that side gig takes off. They're nervous. They don't know about leaving, right? They're changing your career midterm, mid-career. That's not easy. They're all like, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, carpet cleaning or whatever. They've got their foot out the door. And once they see they can make more money, they're gone. And the other issue is that when they go to calls in certain jurisdictions, cops are being prosecuted for self-defense shootings, like clear self-defense shootings. They're going to prosecute to make the people that live in the wherever happy, the left happy. We prosecute them. It's not going to be successful. But during that time, they're struggling. They're going through the court system, paying legal fees. They're not making money. Every cop realized the minute a cop in that county gets prosecuted for a self-defense shooting, nobody's working. Everybody stops. And they're just going to they're like, why should I get involved? You're going to prosecute me for doing my job. I'm not doing it. They do what's called pseudo policing. They show up, put a Band-Aid on it, and then go off. And that's the way it is. I remember in my county, so my county included Oakland and Berkeley. So that's my jury pool. And I remember in 2014 with Michael Brown, when all that crap happened, the hands up, don't shoot crap. I came into briefing and told my guys, I cannot protect you. I cannot keep you from the outside sources coming after you if something were to happen. It's time for you to be firemen. Just respond to calls. People have no idea how much that self-initiated activity stops crime. I'll give you an example. One of our guys sees a suspicious car. All it was, the plate was obstructed. He stops the car. It was, I'm not kidding, a hitman going to a person's house to go kill the entire family. He had the Mac 11 machine pistol with the silencer, with the brass catcher, picture of the family, right? Directions, how to get out of there. It was like a movie, right? All off a stop for mechanical violation. Well, now they're telling cops, they're making laws that say cops cannot stop somebody for mechanical violation. But come on, man. Like, so they're just looking at like, why am I here?
None of this is happening just by chance. So if we step back and we look at the 30,000 foot view, you've mentioned this many times. Obama's made no secret that he wants a national police force that he would have control over. And just to be perfectly clear, he is the puppet master who's controlling potato head strings right now, the illegitimate occupier of the White House, for lack of a better term. But here's the deal. When you get all these defund the police things happening, whether a cop is prosecuted or not, just the fact that they were charged fuels the sentiments in the community that the cops are bad people. These are bad people. They're doing bad things, but the facts don't bear that out. There was a study done not too long ago, and I don't have the exact numbers, but they're directionally correct, where they asked a bunch of black people in inner cities how many black males were killed each year by law enforcement officers. And they all guessed these ridiculous numbers, like thousands, tens of thousands sort of thing. And it was less than 20 for the entire country, the entire year before. But they, like, again, whether they get the conviction or not is irrelevant. They've now put this officer in the public eye and said he shot a black guy and shouldn't have done that sort of thing. It's the same crap that's going on with Trump right now. The lender who lended him the money for the buildings in New York State testified on his behalf. They made all kinds of money off of him. He paid the loans back in full. They want to do more business with him. The conviction's not going to stand. There's no way it can stand. But they're tar and feathering him with this stuff. They don't give a shit if they get a conviction in the end. As long as they can just make him look like crap, then your low information voters automatically think, well, that's a done deal. That's the way it is. So at the end of the day, what we've got going on here is you have a concerted effort to undermine the police. Just like you've said many times, Keith, good cops won't do immoral things and will not do unconstitutional things. We wipe out all the good cops through all this bullshit, for lack of a better term. Then you start bringing in people who are non-citizens and promise them a pathway to citizenship in return for being a compliant law enforcement officer. And the next step is a national police force of compliant people, non-citizens, taking up arms against American citizens for complete bullshit. We could really go down a deep rabbit hole here.
No, Chris, you're not going down a rabbit hole. Hold on. LAPD and LA County Sheriff hired DACA people. They are illegal aliens. They are prohibited by federal law from carrying a firearm. I don't agree with any gun laws, but I'm throwing it out for people to understand though. They hired them because now they're hiring illegal aliens. Okay. They changed the rules so that they can hire illegals. These guys went through the academy, graduated from a California Police Academy, and now LAPD and LA County want to change the rules so that illegals can have firearms off duty. Well, hold on a minute. These guys graduated from an academy. I taught a California Police Academy. You have to pass the firearms module. That means the department issued them a firearm to complete that module, which is a federal felony. Where's ATF? ATF is going after citizens for bump stocks, for FRT triggers, for all this stupid stuff. Why aren't you going after the range master and the supervisors and the instructors that gave them that firearm to complete training, right? And it sounds like, I haven't been able to confirm it, but it sounds like they're carrying a firearm on duty, which is still a federal felony, right? You have good working officers working at LAPD that know this is wrong, that are looking at this going, I'm out. You want me to arrest people for firearms violations when you're letting these guys carry? You're going to have an illegal alien, federally prohibited person arresting American citizens for California's made up gun laws.
So I stumbled across an article where they had interviewed some people, LAPD cops, and they were obviously cherry picked because they were defending this process. They were defending these non-citizens to have the right to be police and whatnot, because what they said, specific to your point, is that, well, it's really not a bad thing and it's really not against the law, because when they punch in for their shift, we give them a sidearm. And when they clock out for their shift, we take it away from them and we put it in the gun safe. And that was their response to your point. And that was in writing. So,
dude, but like, think about it. California passes these stupid gun laws. All right. So at the beginning of the year, I'm sorry, I'm getting all hot now.
You're good.
So
let her rip.
In the beginning of the year, we have legal update because California just passes a boatload of laws. And when I gave it that update to my troops, I'd have, all right, here's new laws. And some are good, domestic violence, stuff that matters, right? But then we go, I would have a separate section that said laws that don't matter. And it was the laws that they're making up, right? And it was always firearms laws. You can't bring ammunition to the state, stuff like that, right? You have a background check, and everybody would laugh. And I always would say, don't be the cop that decides to enforce this stuff.
Good advice.
So now you have an illegal alien sitting through this and goes, oh, you got to have a background check to have ammunition, right? Or you can't have a magazine over 10 rounds. The guy's a federally prohibited person that's going to arrest somebody for the crime of having a magazine more than 10 rounds. Because he's going to do it because the others aren't. And then now you got this guy doing a federal felony, arresting a guy for a state.
It's complete bizarre world. Go ahead.
But then the illegal will get promoted because he's enforcing the woke law and no one else is. So those will make you a supervisor.
And the hardworking guy, I'll give you an example. It took me 20 years to get sergeant. Why did it take me 20 years to get sergeant? Because I kept getting passed over because I'm not a yes man. And that's every cop I know. It's the same way. You'd be a great supervisor, but you're not towing the company line is usually a leftist line that doesn't help citizens on the street. Good, hardworking cops look at that and say, I'm out.
Well, again, none of this is by mistake, right? So you've heard me say it before. I'll say it again. I don't care if I'm repeating myself. The Second Amendment is the firewall between globalism and freedom. We're the last man standing. And I want Jeff to speak to this in a second. But if America goes down, so Obama gets his way with everything. He gets his federal police force that's compliant, bunch of jackboots, brown shirts, whatever you want to call them. And they start enacting Alex Soros' plan, which I don't know if you guys caught this or not, but 2 days ago, Alex Soros went on record and said that he's going to wipe every single MAGA/Trump supporter off the face of the earth. And this is barely 2 months after he issued a death threat against
Come get me.
Skinny ass soy boy piece of shit 2 months ago, put $45 and a bullet hole through the glass and basically said, we will assassinate Trump if he gets reelected. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. You can go look it up. There's no hyperbole on my part. That's the fact of the matter. So at the end of the day, America goes down, they get what they want, their one world order, one world government, and have complete control over everything. So my question to you, Jeff, is when you've traveled through all these different countries as a CIA operative, how many of these other countries would allow non-citizens to acquire and carry firearms?
Zero.
That's what I thought. You mean,
Yeah,
so when
if
you
you
were in
were,
Russia, they didn't give you a gun? Like
well,
they
I
didn't give
was
you
I
like an
was
AK
never
or
in
anything?
Russia because I was blown to the Russians early on, so I couldn't
Okay.
go. Because a spy who gave them my name and a bunch of others, so I couldn't go to Russia. But I was in Uzbekistan, I've been to Tajikistan, I've been through Afghanistan, Egypt, Turkey. None of those guys would let a foreigner own a gun. And in Turkey, oh my God, if you had a gun, if you were a foreigner with a gun in Turkey, Midnight Express would look like Mary Poppins. And those guys do not screw around. I knew a guy who was an instructor of mine who had got crossways with the Turks, and he couldn't tell them he was agency right away. Something about agents getting out of the country, etc. Well, they just tuned him up, and then finally, after like 3 days, he knew that his guys had gotten away because they followed the plan, and he says, "Okay, I'm really CIA," and the Turks are NATO, and they're allies of them.
Yeah.
They continued to tune him up because he was doing stuff in their territory and didn't tell them. He wasn't carrying a gun. He was just doing something they didn't want. So then he calls his boss to come down. They called his boss down to get him out. Well, not his boss, the guy from Istanbul, the base chief. They beat the crap out of him too.
Holy shit.
Just as a way of saying, don't screw around in our turf. And the Egyptians, man, you want to scare a terrorist? They were going to turn you over to the Egyptian. Those guys do not screw around. I don't know why we put up with this crap. And if you look at what's going on in Gaza, who is not giving them any aid whatsoever? Egypt.
Right next door.
We're not going to feed these idiots.
Right. So
you're a bigger pain in our ass.
Let's just use Egypt as an example. What are the chances that a common citizen in Egypt could acquire firearms and ammunition and stuff? I don't know. It's just curious.
To be honest, I'm not so sure either. Egypt you can probably get one.
Okay.
But you'd better be. When I was in Afghanistan, they were selling landmines in the market. That's
awesome.
So, well, yes and no. So I have a friend of mine. He's American, specializes in importing and exporting weapons. And his brother-in-law is the Minister of Defense in Pakistan. He would go over there frequently in the past years to visit his sister and send me screenshots of the $80+ billion worth of equipment that the shithead in the Oval Office left over there for sale for pennies on their equivalent of a marketplace, right? So you're talking like night vision rigs, $17,000, $18,000 selling for $400, the equivalent of $400 US over there. But I have another question for you then, since you opened this up, Jeff. Tyler White, when he was served in Afghanistan, he was there several times. He was very covert.
Mm-hmm.
He said that nobody would bat an eye at somebody carrying an AK, but if anybody was spotted with a pistol, they ran like hell because that was the signature of an assassin over there, and that pistols are very uncommon for Afghanis.
Well, they were there. They weren't as common as AKs. AKs were cheaper than dirt. Even landmines, we used to buy them. We would tell people, we'll buy the landmines. They were selling them in the marketplace. These were little anti-personnel toe poppers for $3. I'd say, I'll give you $5. So people would buy them up, bring them to us. And because I'm like, if there's one thing Afghanistan doesn't need, it's more landmines.
Right.
So we were just buying them up to get them off the market. And we were actually buying surface-to-air missiles the same way because the only planes flying were ours. So I didn't want anybody with a surface-to-air missile. But handguns were rare because in the war, the only ones who carried handguns were officers, and there weren't that many officers. So most people had access to AKs. What's rare are revolvers. I had a one-armed Afghan guy asking me to get a revolver because he couldn't rack a slide because his arm had been blown off by a tank. Wow. And you couldn't get a revolver, but you could get a Makarov. They weren't that rare. They just aren't that useful.
I've seen some, call them offline images that I've been shown firsthand of these Afghanis guarding their tribal leaders. And you can see when their robes open up a little bit that they're carrying 2 pistols, not just one. And Tyler didn't show me those pictures. It was somebody else, but he specifically said when I mentioned it to him, he said, that's the sign of an assassin. It's just your common Afghani is not going to have pistols readily available to him, but nobody will bat an eye at an AK-47. So we're way off in the weeds compared to where we started from, but suffice it to say that we're the only country in the world stupid enough to allow these foreign globalist assholes to manipulate our country the way they're doing. They're destroying our country from inside multiple different ways. There was an article I read this morning, high-level overview, how TikTok is being used to poison young people's minds to make them believe that there are hundreds of genders and that there's no such thing as parental rights and all this malarkey. And it's just to divide people, right? I see some of the flame wars on X and just think to myself, on both sides, golly, you guys took that hook, line, and sinker. Like, how could you believe such an asinine story? But let's reel it back in and finish up the conversation on the police force, well, law enforcement in general, is there anything that can be done? Do either of you have any ideas on what we can do to correct this situation?
So I've thought a lot about this to make to make policing great again. And if you can come up with a great saying along those lines, let me know. I'm looking for like a nice catchphrase I can use when I give my talks. The inside deep down, I think we're too far down the hole and I don't think it's going to come back. And I hate to say that, but think about it. Like to get us up to, they have to make policing attractive again. Like when I applied to become a cop, I competed against 500 people and I made it. And that was routine. That's the way it was back then. It was an attractive job because policing, like I remember being on SWAT and I remember this guy, this criminal was holed up in his house and the patrol cops were dealing with it. And I remember showing up and getting out of the SWAT van and we're like lining single file to where we're going to go. And the whole community is applauding. Like, you're going to go, like, dude, your SWAT's coming for you. You're getting your ass kicked. And like, you could tell it was like, yeah, we're finally going to deal with this guy. Right. And I remember how good that felt inside. Like, it made me feel good. Right. I remember being in Oakland and we were taking down this huge criminal gang, the Black Muslim Brotherhood. And they had a place called the Barracks. And I remember covering that. I remember this lady in a building next door looks out, mouths thank you, and then closes the blinds, right? Because she can't come out and say it.
Yeah.
Right. But she knows we're looking. That makes you feel good. We've taken that all away. There's nothing to make you feel good anymore. All you see is you get treated like crap. So we have to start treating them with respect, right? And bring respect back to the job. And then you have to pay them a wage that is worth risking your life.
So
because a lot of guys are leaving to go make more money somewhere else.
100%. Let's just back up for a second. So 500 people competing for 2 spots based entirely on performance and nothing else as far as making it. And now we showed a couple articles where various agencies are lowering the standards. Just a really simple one I want to ask you. What was the height requirement back then when you first went in?
Oh, God. We didn't have a height. Some agencies had it. We're in California, so it's been liberal for a long time. There wasn't really a height requirement, but I don't remember seeing a lot of short cops. I don't remember seeing a lot of people that when they walked into a room in uniform, holding a nightstick saying, everybody stop, put your hands up. And people go, I ain't gonna listen to you. They looked at it like, oh, I think that guy's gonna beat me. They looked like, yeah, that's gonna hurt.
So we're both the same age, product of the 60s. 1969, best year ever. Year we put a man on the moon. A lot of departments when we were in our early 20s, 5'11" and 6 foot was the typical range. And you could argue that one way or the other. I'm not that tall, but I put myself up against somebody that tall. Done it many times. So I don't know that height's the most important thing, but what I do know is that you can't take a guy or a girl who's 120, even 150 pounds soaking wet and put them up against somebody who's athletic and 200, 250 plus pounds.
We did, like, they still have it. You have to pass a physical agility requirement. And it wasn't hard. If you ever taken a not military, let me narrow it down, Army or Marine Corps PT test, it's along those lines. Right. And they've been softening that up repeatedly. And like the biggest thing was, I remember like one of the obstacles, you had to jump a wall, right? Something simple, right? Well, a lot of people didn't have the upper body strength to get over a wall. So then departments started lowering the wall. It used to be a 6-foot wall for a 6-foot fence. Are you going to jump a fence as a cop? Yeah, man, a lot of times you are. You're going to have to climb a fence, do something, right? So then they lowered it to 5 feet. Then they lowered it to 4 feet. And then now they hold special classes just to help people get over the wall with technique and all this kind of stuff. And then we had a written test. The written test has been staying pretty steady. They have dumbed it down a little bit. And then finally, Detroit PD just put out a video. If you have warrants, come apply. We will help you clear up your warrants. Are you kidding me? If you have warrants, that shows that you have no responsibility. Right. That you let your life get out of control, that you didn't take care of simple things, right? And now you want that person to be in charge of a crime scene, investigating a murder. Come on, man. What are we doing?
Yeah, clown show for sure.
So what you do is you get people that we would not have hired 10 years ago.
Right.
And they're now coming on.
Yeah,
what's that?
That's what I was driving at, that you keep lowering the barrier to entry. You have pathetic compensation for the danger that these people are facing. You're not going to get a bunch of high quality people at all. Jeff, what are your thoughts on turning this around?
The pay is ridiculous. If I'm going to put my life on the line and get cussed at and spit on and all this, and I'm making less money than some guy down in McDonald's in Southern California. It's really stupid. But I think as culturally, well, it needs to come from the top, first of all. When you have the White House doesn't respect what police do. And we saw that with Obama. Oh, Trayvon Martin could have been my son. Well, I was living in Sanford County, Florida when that happened. Trayvon, if Trayvon's your son, you were probably in jail, which is why he turned out to be the thug he was. The kid was a thug.
Absolutely was.
He wasn't an innocent bystander, no more than that the Brown Mr. Hands up, don't shoot.
Right.
But I think what we do for the military, where we go to people, we say, thank you for your service. We don't do that for a cop. And we really should, because let's be honest, since we've left Afghanistan, you're more likely to get shot as a cop than you are as a soldier right now, unless you're in a war zone. But those cops have put their asses on the line every damn day. And we should thank them for that, because it's our butts they're protecting. They don't need to be a cop to protect their own butt. All they need is a trigger finger.
Well, there is a lot of us that it'll never happen. But there's a lot of us that are calling for a day of every cop calling in sick. And I'm telling you, I say it out loud in classes. We need to pick July 4th is the day we all call in sick. And we pick July 4th because people don't realize this, but as a cop, it is a crazy day with shootings, stabbings, just mayhem, right? And you know what? Take that day off, go gather your family up, and then go enjoy a barbecue with your family and just call in sick. And you'll find out, I'll give you an example. In Atlanta is a huge, and they were prosecuting one of their cops for self-defense shooting. And all the cops got pissed off. And this was not publicized. It did not make the press, but I have the roll call sheet for that day. There were only 3 cops that showed up for duty that day, 2 lieutenants and a sergeant, for a city of over 1 million people, right? It's over 1 million, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Easily.
3 cops showed up for the entire city. Insider sent me a copy of the roll call sheet to prove it. And not one bit of that was in the press. That means there was nobody available to answer any call. Cops were telling me the gangs set up checkpoints within their neighborhoods to like start pocket checking people, which is robbery, right? And all sorts of mayhem like that. And there was nobody to respond except 2 lieutenants and a sergeant that are probably commanders now, because they did what they were told, right? But I tell you what, you're going to see more of that happening. It happened in Vallejo recently, last year in Vallejo, a very high crime city in California. They all called in sick one day because they're screwing their cops over. They all called in sick, and there was nobody to take calls. And the sheriff's department, they called the sheriff's department to come take calls. And the sheriff, good on him, told them that we're not coming because this is your own mess. Figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Unreal. So
bad management on your part is not a crisis on my part.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My department did that to Oakland. We showed up and the city was burning, and they wanted me to sign a paper for my guys saying they're going to abide by Oakland's use of force policy. No, man, I'm not doing that because you've watered this down so much. They can't use tear gas in a riot situation.
What's the point of having tear gas?
What's that?
What's the point of having tear gas? That's what it's for.
That's the only way you're going to break up some of these things, right? I'm not signing it. So I left and brought my guys back to my city. It was mutual aid. The best part of it, like my command staff totally supported the decision, and we never sent anybody back to Oakland.
That 2-gang orange magazine on that Berna Mission 4 is loaded up with CS rounds. You don't even have to hit the person. You just have to hit something close to it. Works really well. I want to look at the main crux of today's video, which is you need help. You try to call 911, network's down, or you call 911. Staffing issues mean that nobody can respond to your call. Let's talk advice. What can people do to prepare for this? It's already happening. As Keith can attest to, it's a daily thing where 911 will say, we don't have anybody respond to that level of a crime. What can people do? What can our audience do to better their chances when they do need help, but there is no help coming?
Get all your neighbors together and get on the same page. Tell all your neighbors, and basically create a little mutual aid group. If I live in a court, not all, most of the neighbors are on board. Okay. Have multiple options. You need to have, everybody thinks deadly force. They've got all their guns and bullets, but a lot of times it doesn't come down to that. It comes down to less lethal. It comes down to I can't shoot him, but I need him to go away. Right. Like guy comes up and goes, fine, get me out of here. You ain't going to shoot him. You can pull out your burner though and go blast him with a couple of pellets or the kinetic rounds. Those things hurt, right? At a distance, and be like, I told you to leave. So I have multiple options, right? That includes pepper spray, a burner. I really, impact weapons are fine, but really think like pepper spray, which is super cheap, $16 on Amazon. but have like a bunch of them because you're going to go through it a lot, right? Depending on how big the crowd is. And then that burn, I think, is best. Number 3, outside of that. So as an example, you can go to christianwarriortraining.com. I have a use of force video on there that talks about use of force. It's 30 minutes. Go sit through it and it'll tell you how, like what proportional force, how to use force and all that kind of stuff, because you are your own cop until they show up, which could be days, right? And you're your own cop, but there's going to be a reckoning when everything comes back on. And when that comes back on, you're going to be held accountable for what you did. And you're going to have to justify what you've done. And I hear a lot of preppers go like, oh, I'm just going to shoot them. Man, dude, that is a stupid plan. You are not thinking this out, because a lot of times, number one, that's just wrong. Okay. You're participating in that fall of society with that kind of a view. Okay. Use your less lethal options. When everything is said and done, if somebody is going to try and hold you accountable, you can justify what you've done.
Everything he says, I agree with 100%. And even if you do, eventually, the guy's coming at you and you hit him with a burn around or you hit him with pepper spray, and there's those people just keep charging. Mm-hmm. And then you have to drop the guy. You can go and say, look, I tried to talk him out of it. He kept coming. I've used less lethal. I used a pepper spray, used a kinetic round from the Byrna. I tried everything. He kept coming. My only option left was lethal force. Didn't want to do it, but I had to. And I think you're much more likely to walk away from that one unscathed or relatively unscathed.
Perfect example, right, of that. And this, just to go back to why cops aren't doing the job anymore. San Leandro, California, suburb of Oakland. Cop is getting prosecuted for murder. He responded to a call of a man hitting people at a store with a baseball bat. He's just whacking everybody. Cop rolls up, goes in, sees the guy, deploys a taser, right? Lesser means. 20 years ago, he would have shot him. Okay. But he deploys the taser, doesn't work. He starts getting beat with the baseball bat. So he shoots the guy. The guy dies. Officer's white, suspect's black. They prosecute him for murder. They are actively prosecuting for murder right now. I read, it's called probable cause declaration. It's the state's justification of why they're charging you. I read that. They said that if the officer had waited for another officer, then he wouldn't have needed to use deadly force.
He's in
a store whacking people with a baseball bat. I don't want you to wait. Did you see what I'm talking about?
That was Georgia. A private citizen could have shot the guy dead.
Yes.
And within the law.
Yeah.
In California, a citizen could have shot him and it would have been okay. Not a cop. A citizen could have shot the bad guy and he'd be okay, but we're going to prosecute the cop because he's white and the suspect's black. That is a George Soros Pamela Price, George Soros backed DA that's charging this cop. All the cops in that county are pretty much just barely holding the line. Okay. But great point though about proportional force. You're going to keep I can't shoot him yet, but let me go through my options.
So I am not an attorney. I am not offering people legal advice. I have a good friend of mine who is an attorney and also served in law enforcement as well. And that particular individual said to me that if they were to have a home invasion, that they would fill the invader full of lead, high-speed lead poisoning, and then would take a couple shots with their Byrna less lethal and hit the wall in the general vicinity. And they have no cameras inside their home, only outside. And when they were questioned, they would say, I shot a couple rounds from my Byrna less lethal. He kept coming at me. I had to kill him. But that's not legal advice from Chris Evan or Survival Dispatch, but there's an anecdotal story on this topic for y'all to consider. You said something about this guy with a bat. So I will be in Tampa next week filming Surviving Man Season 3. I'm the host of Surviving Man Aftermath is the show I host. And there's a company that's going to be there. There's all kinds of really cool sponsors, different tactical companies like Genesis Firearms and Black Aces and all these guys. There's a company, and they won't show me what they've got until we get there next week, that sells a tactical bat. It apparently is some crazy home defense weapon sort of thing. So I'm dying to see that, because years ago I was always told that if you carried a Peacemaker in your truck, make sure you had a ball glove and a baseball to go with it and not just the bat sort of thing.
That's the truth, man.
Again, I am not an attorney. I'm not giving anybody legal advice. I'm strictly telling you what I was told many years ago.
No, in California, it's a felony if you possess a baseball bat as a deadly weapon. So you carry a glove and a ball and the ball, because you're going to go to practice.
Stay tuned for next week, because we're going to have some really interesting content. We're gonna have the first-hand experience with this tactical bat. Jeff Nicholas, 161 Night Stalker Black Hawk pilot, who the movie Black Hawk Down was based on, owns a company called Compliant Technologies, and being the cement head that I am, I have volunteered to be the victim for his electric glove demonstration next week, which I've seen the videos. 120-pound girl takes down a 320-pound guy inside of a minute by laying hands on them with these gloves. That's coming up next week. Another interesting thing on the law enforcement front that's coming up next week is Keith and I will be on a very special episode of Truth Be Told with Tom Holman, Trump's director of ICE. Sheriff Mark Lamb will be there, and multiple other people from law enforcement discussing the border problem. And we just discussed this in a recent episode of these organized gangs coming across the border. So far in the past week, I'm aware of at least 4 murders committed by illegal invaders on young, innocent Americans. And yet the woke mayor of Athens, Georgia, saw fit to lecture his community yesterday on how there's no correlation between illegal invaders and crime, total crock of shit, and how we need to show them dignity and respect. Well, how about they show our citizens dignity and respect and stop fucking raping them and murdering them? There's a fucking novel idea.
You ask too much.
Well, apparently of these sanctuary cities, that's asking too much. What else do you guys have for suggestions? You call 911, the network's down, there's no cops to respond. Is there anything else that we need to share with our audience as far as things that they can do to be proactive?
I would set your neighbors up with cheap ham radios. You can do the Baofeng, right? It doesn't matter. Just something that you can call and be like, hey man, I got somebody bad here. The other thing that I do too, there's 2 other things that I would recommend. Number one is reinforcing your entry points in your house. Look at reinforcing your door as an example. That the screws that hold together your striker plate and your bolt, your catch bolt and all that, those are all superficial short screws. Go buy long 2-inch, 2.5-inch screws that go into the frame, because as a guy that's battered down many a drug dealer's door, doing simple things like that is going to delay and give you time to go prepare.
Add an outswing decorative steel door as well, essentially a screen door, but a decorative steel that's an outswing. That is really going to slow somebody down from kicking in the door.
Yep. And if you want to get around that as like a regular person, shotgun breaching is the way to go. Go ahead and look that up. The last thing, besides reinforcing your door, radios for your neighbors, all that kind of stuff, I have a drone and I use it for my YouTube channel. But also the main reason why I bought it was neighborhood surveillance. I look at, my neighborhood is pretty easy to seal off, and I've actually got a map of it. And I've sectioned it off into sectors so that we can't, like almost like a beat system for police, or you break up the city, but I've done it for the neighborhood to where we can all coordinate and combine for self-defense. And then I've got the drone that I can use to go outside the neighborhood to look for whatever stuff, so I don't have to necessarily leave. I think that's a little like far end extreme. I have been worked in the city where 911's gone down for the day and you can't call. I have worked in my city where 911 and radios went down, and it is, but you don't know it. You personally, like all hundreds of thousands of people living in your city, nobody realizes it because they're just ignorant of it. But if you have to know that if that's what's happening, you got to be able to prepare for yourself, because for just in that 24-hour period, the entire city went to shit. But what's going to happen if that lasts for weeks or longer?
Maximum 72 hours and the wheels are coming off. Jeff?
Yeah, well, I've got on our house, we've got big double doors in the front. Well, we bought made for us custom heavy duty security door. And it's very decorative. It looks pretty, but it doesn't have screen. It has expanded metal that you can't get to. It locks from the inside with the deadbolt. And no one's getting in too quickly with that. And if they go through the window, that's going to be a lot of noise that give me time to arm up. But I think another thing is we live in a neighborhood too that has only one way in, and I'm the first house. Everybody jokes and says, "Yeah, I'm the gatekeeper." But talk to your neighbors, have a plan, have a community, be able to communicate with them, because if something's happening to you, it might be happening to them too, and they can't reach out.
Yep.
And if you have an elderly neighbor who's getting robbed, you might be okay they may leave you and go to them. So. And I've got a neighbor who's a single woman who lives alone in a big house. And she bought an AR and she hadn't even gotten it out of the box yet. And I'm like, no, you got to get it out of the box. We need to go shoot that. And me and my wife we'll go shooting one. You need to know how to pull the trigger. You need to know where the safety is. You need to know that. Even if you're shooting inside your own house, no point in having a gun if you don't know how to use it.
Something I'd add to that, we have a free download on survivaldispatch.com to put your home defense plan together. Costs nothing at all. Just you can grab it from the community menu up top. It's a free download, 10, 12 pages long. Lots of information there to account for different scenarios and help you to help yourself putting your home defense plan together. Simple things as well. In addition to the doors, windows, put thorny bushes underneath them. A lot of area have thorny bushes. We've got things here in Florida. We've got robolinis here, which is a palm tree that has these insanely long needles full of poison that will go through leather, denim, you name it. And it really sucks getting stuck by them. I've done it a bunch of times. Another thing that you don't hear people discuss too much in these types of situations, if it's a grid down situation, in addition to all these other networks being down, which is highly probable if we're attacked by China's cyber team, you need to disguise the fact that you have electricity. It makes you an instant target. So somewhere where you can completely black out and do what you need to do as far as having light to prep your food. But even then, if you're cooking food, then somebody is going to make a note of that. So trying to really contain any type of activity that shows you have anything that somebody else wants. So in other words, don't go hang out on your front porch with a plate carrier and your AR and your night vision goggles and stuff, because you will be overwhelmed by mobs of people. You don't have enough ammo to defend against that.
If you have a solar generator, don't hook up lights. They're quiet, but if you got to run a refrigerator or a freezer to keep your foods, whatever, for radios or charge up your radios and your laptops and phones, don't have lights.
You got to keep it on the down low. That's what I'm saying. If you've got either thick draperies or black curtains or black anything, could be trash bags, contractor trash bags to block the light from going through your windows to outside. Just if you don't look like a target, then chances are you probably won't be a target. Yeah. Other than that, I don't know, guys. It seems like every video I mention these guys, we are not affiliated with Garmin, but these are pretty badass satellite device. The Garmin InReach Mini 2, I think I pay $12 a month for this. Got an SOS button on the side. If I recall correctly, there's around 10,000 people who have been their lives have been saved from the SOS button. So not people who needed assistance because they were slightly off the path, but 10,000 legitimate life saved. These tether to your phone as well. So if the cell phone network's down, you can use this to pull down maps. You can use it to send text messages in case the comms network is up elsewhere, or if somebody has one of these tethered to their phone. We discussed radios. I think we pretty much covered all the bases, usual stuff, the training, make sure that you're physically fit as best as possible. We don't discuss that very often, and I'll tell you why as we wrap up this episode. We have learned that the survival prepping community wants to learn as long as it's not a heavy lift. So it doesn't matter whose channel you go to and how many followers that they have. When they publish content on being physically fit, it bombs every single time. So if you don't want to exercise and you don't want to eat a healthy diet, that's your decision. We're not going to preach to you because it's not up to us. But there are probably some small things that you can do to improve your condition. There's over-the-counter supplements that can have a positive impact on your health and well-being. Not the same as exercising, but can help a little bit. Even just getting out and walking around the block is better than nothing. The human body was not meant to be stationary. So the longer you're stationary, the worse your body breaks down. So you don't have to go out and bust your balls, but at least try to do something. So
just walking around your neighborhood, get your blood going, but it also gives you the time to recon. So you see what's new, what's different, what's going on. Look at it tactically. It's a recon by foot.
Meet your neighbors.
100%. So
yeah, meet your neighbors.
I don't care what anybody says. We've been sent almost 50 e-bikes over the course of the past 2 years. At first, I kind of looked at them as a novelty, but I've come to learn that. So I've got an e-bike that I'm testing right now called the Rev 1, and they sent me an extra battery for it. And it's absolutely killing me because this bike allows you to supercharge the drive controller, which is essentially the transmission. So I put 21 miles on this bike, horsing around with the drive controller boosted. It's over 40 miles an hour, but it gets there in the blink of an eye. It'll spin the tire. It's crazy fast, but I wanted to know how far can I get on this bike in pedal assist level 1. I've got over 70 miles on the first battery charge, and it's still got 40% battery left. I can't kill the dang battery. So and how this is germane to what you just said, Jeff, I go ride around our neighborhood, 2 laps around the neighborhood's 5 miles, and I get fresh intel on everything that's going on. I know where there's crews working, different people in the neighborhood who wouldn't normally be in the neighborhood, all of that stuff. I know where all the cops live because they all have their cars at home at the end of the night, those sort of things. But the other thing with e-bikes, just before I get off that topic, is you can ride an e-bike balls to the wall, go 20, 30 miles an hour and get more exercise, or at least the equivalent exercise to riding a regular bike if you go high intensity. So it's fun because it's even faster if you like speed and stuff like that. Anyway, let's get back to the conflicted question of the day, since Mike is not here. You're at a convenience store and a gunfight breaks out a few aisles over. At first glance, it looks like the place is being robbed. You are carrying a concealed weapon, which is loaded and ready to go. What would your next steps be, Keith?
All right. First thing first, while you're getting your gun out to be ready to do harm, you're looking for cover, because if you're a couple aisles over, those bullets are going to come flying through those cookies and those donuts and everything else, or the beer aisle. It's just going to fly right through there and you're going to get drilled. You have no idea what's going on. You don't know who's good, who's bad. Right now, none of your business. Get your gun out. If you got your kids with you, family, whatever, bring them with you. And then get to cover is something that will stop bullets. There's not much in a convenience store. Once you find cover, you can assess who's the bad man. If you can assess and find out who the bad man is, then go ahead and start destroying that person. If you can't fit, most of the time though, from my experience, it's going to be two bad people shooting at each other. We call it no humans involved in HI, right? So if you have NHI going on, that is none your business. The victor is going to be destroyed by you. So that way he can't do something else bad. Okay. Meaning like you're going to stop him from hurting anybody else. Right. But assess, wait, see what's going on, then take your action.
And my first thing would be get out of the line of fire. If they're shooting at each other, I don't want to be between them or behind either one of them, because bullets have no conscience and have no brain. But then I think, yeah, you get your weapon out, be prepared, and then you need to assess the situation. Finding cover, of course, is primary. But if one of them looks like a gangbanger and the other one is wearing the 7-Eleven uniform, you kind of figure out which one's the good guy, which one's the bad guy. And then as long as you're taking care of your own butt first, then you want to take out the bad guy if you can.
We've done a number of videos over the years titled being gas station ready. It's a top 5 location to be assaulted. And there's multiple aspects to this, but suffice it to say, obviously most convenience stores are attached to a gas station these days. So myself, I'm always on high alert when we go to the gas station. So I survey who's at the pumps and who's indoors before I do anything, before I swipe a credit card, before I put the pump on. I look inside the building to identify entrances and exits if I have to go in it. Many times I don't, but if I have to. I also, in my mind, I'm looking inside and outside for cover and conceal options behind an ice chest, those sort of things. And then everything after that is exactly what you two said. So I won't repeat that. But Keith, you had something you wanted to add?
I did. One last thing. The thing I've been bringing up a lot is a lot of people will carry a gun that's comfortable and not a gun that's effective, right? So they're carrying like a little tiny Glock 43X. And every time I had somebody, like I knew somebody that had been involved in an off-duty shooting or a citizen, I'd always ask them, what gun did you have? And it was always something that was comfortable. And I'm like, which gun do you wish you had? And every single person, it was, I wish I had a full-size handgun. If there's a gas station shooting, I would much rather have this than my P365 or whatever, because here I have 21 rounds. I've got my optic, my light. Even if you don't need your light, it's blinding. And just my 2 cents, man.
No, I totally agree that that's an ankle holster, which is not a good place to carry a firearm, because there's many instances of going for a weapon attached to your ankle, getting kicked in the face by a bad guy. But
Yep.
I use this for a backup weapon, which is what you're talking, basically like a tiny little Hellcat sort of thing. You're far better off having a 2011 with you, especially a staccato. We're all big fans of staccato.
I'd hate to lose it to evidence though. Because you're going to lose your gun depending on where you're at. You're going to lose your gun for a long time while this goes through court. Even in Idaho, you're looking at years before you get it back.
Yeah, and I hate that, which is why I have Glock 19s many times. They're not the best pistol in the world. They don't compare to a staccato, but still okay. But I can tell you that my ex-wife didn't lock the door to my truck when she moved it. We went to a concert, Kid Rock concert. We came home and the door to my truck was slightly open. And I said, lock my truck when we left? And she said, well, I thought I did. So first thing I did was inspect the truck, and there was a firearm stolen out of my truck. And several months later, I reported it to the local PD. Several months later, they came back to me and said, hey, there's this Deontay something or other that got in a shootout with Daytona Beach PD, which is a couple towns south of us. He ended up getting shot. And the gun at that point in time was not my gun, but they ended up, when they searched his residence, they found my gun and tied it to a murder. And then that gun ended up at Volusia County Sheriff's Office. My brother-in-law is the evidence manager for Volusia County Sheriff's Office, and he told me I will never get that gun back. Not because he doesn't want to get it back from me, but to follow all of their policies and procedures used in a murder. He said, you're never going to get it back.
Well, yeah, because if there's an appeal, it's still evidence.
Well, in California, the evidence code says that all murder evidence has to be held for 99 years.
Wow.
That means your gun's going to be held, even if it's a justified homicide, right? You were justified in shooting the guy.
Yeah.
It's a homicide. By law, it has to be kept for 99 years. You're not going to get it back.
Yeah. So I've got staccatos as well. I love them. They're bad to the bone. Staccato 20-round mag, 1 in the chamber and 2 more in a mag pouch, 61 rounds. I feel pretty confident with that at my side. But
this is my competition gun, so I'll just wait for the beeper to go off and doing good.
That's too funny. All right. Well, appreciate all y'all's time and appreciate everybody out there following Survival Dispatch.
This video is sponsored by William Tell Archery Supplies, home of the Mini Striker Crossbow. Click the link in the description below to learn more.